What's up, Pagosa Springs? You're tuned into KWUF 106.1 FM. You're about to listen to my interview with Lisa Schwantes from Colorado Department of Transportation. Lisa, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
You're over in Durango, right?
Yes, I am the regional communications manager for Southwest and South Central Colorado for the CDOT agency. And I basically cover, our region covers 15 counties. So we are talking about northward to Montrose County, down to the Four Corners, over Wolf Creek Pass to Levita Pass, and then back up to Monarch Pass and Buena Vista. So it's quite the area that we cover.
And what does your job in particular entail?
I take care of public communications of our maintenance jobs and our construction projects that are occurring within those 15 counties. And every day is a different ball of wax whenever I come in. All my best laid plans are always blown out of the water. and I love that about this job. You know, one day I'm covering an emergency incident. It could be a rock fall that closes a road, and I'm keeping in close contact with the maintenance crews that are responding to that, determining and helping me decide what kind of information we need to get out to the public, whether they need to take alternate routes, how long that road is going to stay closed. And then we have our planned projects, like a construction project similar to the one that's happening west of Pagosa, the wildlife crossings that we are constructing. And I just keep tabs on what is happening with that project and giving updates and that sort of thing. And then I take care of internal communications for our 300 plus employees that are within our region.
That's quite the logistical payload.
It's like I said, I never know what's going to happen when I walk through the door or turn on the computer.
Well, similarly, you never know what's going to happen when you turn onto a road. That's kind of the
right.
life.
That's right.
So I'm curious to know, for this position that you're in, there seems to be a lot going on. There's always a lot going on when it hits summertime construction time. It seems like this year there's a lot of projects.
Yes, typically our region will have, during construction season, which starts in the springtime around March, all of our projects start to get going, and then they typically wrap up hopefully with the first snowfall in late fall, early winter. But that's considered our construction season. We typically have about 25 projects that are occurring in these 15 counties for Southwest and South Central Colorado. And we have, looking at my map, and I believe we have at least 3 projects that are scheduled for this construction season in Archuleta County.
So I would like to know a little bit about the ideology that goes behind these projects. What is the plan behind it? Is it centered around wildlife and safety, around motorist safety? Are we trying to slow traffic down through Pagosa and make it more safe? What are the goals at large when it comes to CDOT's projects this year?
First and foremost, our priority is safety. Any way that we can make the roadway, the highway safer for the traveling public, that's vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, any way that we can make the highways and roadways safer, that is first and foremost. A lot goes into once we break ground on a project. The project could have been in the works for anywhere from 10 to possibly 20 years prior to that. That is how long that's the range of time that we look forward to identifying a roadway that will need an improvement, a new feature, a new structure on it. As an example, McCabe Creek, we just got going August 2nd on that project right in downtown Pagosa. And this has been something that we've been working with the county of Archuleta, the town of Pagosa Springs, working with their planning folks and our planning folks. And we've identified this for many years. I started with CDOT 5 years ago, and McCabe Creek was one of the first things I learned about. And here we are breaking ground.
I'm going to ask this question because there was just an infrastructure bill passed. How is that going to impact your funding? Is this going to benefit you guys?
Well, I want to ask you a little question. Are you talking about the federal funding, or are you talking about our state funding, which there are 2 avenues of revenue that could come to us?
Well, I would like you to make the distinction and maybe talk on both of those.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just last month, the state legislature and the governor signed the bill that was passed by the legislature for, I believe it's a 10-year, the state bill would cover 10 years of additional revenue for CDOT to go forward with projects that have been on hold and on the shelf and ready to go. and priority projects that we've identified. And this will immediately provide, I believe it's a little more than $200 million to start with. But over the 10 years, it's going to be more than $6 billion with a B. Starting next year, there's going to be several projects that we're going to be able to start advertising, tweaking plans and getting those going and putting them to add, the projects to add and getting going. So there will be hopefully a lot more projects that we're going to be able, more than the 20 that we typically have per season in our area. Secondly, regarding the federal funding that we are anticipating to come our way, we don't exactly know the amount of money that will be funneled to each state. And so we're waiting to hear a little bit more about the federal funds that could be coming our way with the infrastructure bill at the federal level.
And I'm curious to know what the sentiment is. Now, obviously, nobody's really thrilled during construction periods because of traffic congestion and some of the traffic blocks that it causes. What's your read on Pagosa's opinion of the McCabe Creek project?
Sure. So McCabe Creek, just to give a little background, this is a drainage basin that is about 20 miles long. The basin stretches all the way up to the airport and to the golf course there to the immediate west of downtown. And of course, as you all know, there in Pagosa, that drainage comes right down into Pagosa, the heart of Pagosa. And so McCabe Creek crosses US 160, and you might have to help me out with streets there, but around
so it's right in front of
correct?
right in front of San Juan Mercantile, the old CarQuest
Right.
building downtown, almost where the liquor store is, right by Subway, that kind of area, but more towards the natural grocers.
Exactly. And so currently there are two 84-inch culverts that go under are under the highway there that help with drainage. We've identified them that they need to be replaced. They're metal. They are deteriorating. The last thing we want is for there to be a severe runoff that could happen with, a microburst. I mean, we live in Colorado. We know how these weather events happen. And the last thing we would want would be perhaps a hazardous collapse of those culverts, those aged culverts during a severe runoff. So we have decided that we're going to place 3 concrete cells that will sit side by side and replace those aged metal culverts. So it'll be replaced with some really sturdy concrete culverts that will be able to allow the amount of runoff that, at a high peak, it could take, I understand, as much as 2,000 CFS through that culvert and be able to handle that.
What's the most impactful, maybe most impressive thing you've been involved in working with CDOT?
I have been so fortunate to witness and see firsthand so many things, some fascinating projects, such as our wildlife crossings. The wildlife program is near and dear to my heart. I have been designated as the liaison on our communications team. We've got about 20 folks statewide that work on our communications team, and some of us focus on different issues and topics and programs within CDOT, and I've got a couple of them, and one of them is our wildlife program. And I love anything that deals with the wildlife and improving their habitat. Our highways are bisecting their habitat. They've been here a lot longer than we have and our vehicles have. Anything that we can do to help them continue with their migratory patterns, and whether that be seasonally or throughout the day, that's better for the motorists and it's better for the wildlife. And so I love that.
That kind of leads us to 151. Let's have an update on that project.
Oh, sure. So we are constructing one of our main projects this year for our entire region is we're building 2 wildlife crossings near the junction of 151 and US 160. And that's right near the Lake Capote for the Southern Ute tribe, as well as the turnoff that everyone knows that takes us to Chimney Rock National Monument, right? So we are building an underpass that is to the west of that 151-160 junction. That's where most of our activity is taking place right now. And that has been identified as a major migratory area. We've had a lot, it's considered a hotspot for big game and vehicle crashes. We put a lot of thought into where we're going to construct these wildlife crossings, and this has been identified as a hotspot. So we're constructing currently an underpass that will be utilized by big game. And then just to the east of the junction of 151 and 160, we are building our first, for our region, an overpass. And the wildlife will use the overpass and the vehicles will go under that structure. Our biologists have studied and researched and determined that elk prefer to use an overpass versus an underpass. And this is a major area for elk herds as well. So we're hoping to accommodate both the elk with the overpass and the deer using the underpass.
And I would like to get maybe somewhat specific on some of this stuff. What is the precedent for these wildlife underpasses? This isn't the first one ever. They exist.
Yes,
how has it impacted the motorist versus animal impact status in those areas where the underpass has been installed?
So where we have constructed underpasses and overpasses, as well, I'd like to include that there are several features that help the success of a project like this. And another component, another feature is high deer fencing. There's the joke that, how do wildlife know to use these crossings? How do we get them to do that? They don't know to cross there. Well, the high deer fencing that can stretch for many miles or even a mile or two on either side of a crossing.
It acts like a funnel.
Yes, exactly. That high deer fencing funnels the big game right into the underpass or the overpass. Should a big game, whether it's a deer or an elk, get trapped on the highway, we construct also these jump out ramps every so often along if you've noticed, next time you drive along the highway and you see the high fencing, make sure that you notice that there are jump outs, and that will allow the animal to run along the fence because that's their nature. They run along the fence line, and then they reach the ramp and they can get back into their area outside of the highway corridor. And then back to your question about the success rate, we have one project in Colorado that is up on Highway 9 in the Kremling area, north of the I-70 corridor. And that project has been a true success. It has shown to decrease animal vehicle crashes by 95%. 95%. Fortunately, we have not had any deaths for humans that have been driving and involved in an animal vehicle crash. But of course, it's never good for the animal. We're all very familiar with seeing roadkill on the highway or on the side of the road. But it also is a huge amount of property loss. Typically, it's not unusual for a vehicle to be totaled upon hitting an animal. That success rate just is what we need to hear and know, and gives us the evidence that, yes, these work, and this is going to make the roadway safer. So we are so anxious to get the data once crossings are built in Archuleta County. Our team is just chomping at the bit to see what this will lead to in even a year or two after it's completed.
And I'm curious to know, when you're weighing this, I guess, how wide of a net does it cast? You put in this wildlife crossing. How big of a piece of terrain does it affect?
Yeah, that is the whole point of pinpointing a location on a highway, is where are we seeing evidence of roadkill happening in this area. The Southern Ute tribe has conducted a survey with their biologists, and they have been studying herd migration in that area, and that also helped us determine that this is the place to put these wildlife crossings. So we are very, very pleased with the partnership that we have with the Southern Utes in making this happen.
Okay. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to start taking a few questions from the public. If any of these don't apply, please just let me know. So this one from, I'm going to butcher this name, Sean Projaka, Prochazaka. I don't know. Are they involved with the North Pagosa Boulevard project? If so, a status update, and when do you plan to finish? I threw this one at you because there's a very important distinction that needs to be made here.
Maybe you could help me by telling me exactly where North Pagosa Boulevard stretches. Is that the stretch of roadway that goes in front of the spa?
So when you come into Pagosa from Durango, the first stoplight you hit, if you turn left, that's North Pagosa. Then it connects to Piedra Road, County Road 600 in Hatcher.
Okay. So me asking you that question is kind of an indication that I am not familiar with this roadway, right?
Right.
And that is because CDOT only maintains and improves U.S. and state highways.
Those lines get blurred a lot, I'm guessing.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Many times we'll get a call to our customer service hotline, and folks want to know when are they going to come plow in front of my house? And the first thing our customer service representative asks is, what is your address? If it is a city street or a county road, then we need to explain to that customer that they need to call either the city or the county to find out what the status is of either snow being plowed or a construction project, that sort of thing. So any city street, any county road, that would belong to those entities. And again, CDOT only maintains and improves U.S. and state highways.
Question from Nick Yazzie. Is CDOT looking for interns or new grads? How can you break into the highway and bridge infrastructure industry? I will graduate from the School of Mines in December. That's why he's asking the question.
That's great. That's great. Yes. CDOT is always looking for new talent. I would encourage anyone to utilize the state job and employment site. I wish I had the address right off the bat. But if you go to CDOT's website, and that is codot.gov, and you use our search engine, just type in job or job opportunities, and it will take you right to the state site of every job that is available for any state agency. And you can narrow that search down to CDOT, engineering jobs, right-of-way jobs, maintenance jobs, heavy equipment jobs, communications, administration, business. I mean, you name it. Obviously, we're a huge agency. We need all sorts of folks and all types of talent to help run the agency. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in working with a state or with CDOT in particular to utilize that site and see what job opportunities are available.
This next question, I'm going to kind of create a composite question out of it because it bands together a few different comments that I had from our social media posts. This question is CDOT in any way planning a Pagosa Springs bypass to bypass downtown?
I can say I do not believe that is in the plans right now. A bypass is not in the plans, but we will continue to find ways to improve US 160 through the town. And one of those would be next season, not this year, but next season, we will possibly put to add some improvements to Putt Hill.
Do you have any details you are able to speak on that?
Sure. So this is going to be an overlay project. That roadway, if anybody drives it, knows that it needs a little tender loving care, right? It needs, the pavement needs some improvement. So we're going to do a repaving, resurfacing project from, I believe it's going to be from Piedra Road to 10th Street. Just recently, I believe it was last week, we presented to the Pagosa Council, and Pagosa's planning and development also presented to the council because we've been working with the town of Pagosa on this. But it was recommended to council that we also restripe and reconfigure the lanes on Putt Hill. We're expecting to get that. I believe it was approved by council. We're just waiting for the signed letter. CDOT conducted a survey, did a study on this roadway with traffic counts and traffic movement. What was determined was we need to add a turn lane onto, and these would be westbound at the junctions of Pike and Majestic. So there will be a lane change to allow for the turning lane onto those two different streets.
Now, is this going to eliminate the second lane going west?
Just for the area where those turn lanes are going to be located, the westbound will be funneled to one lane only. Once you pass that junction, that intersection, it will allow for two lanes again.
What is traffic going to look like in downtown Pagosa Springs for the rest of the summer?
For the rest of this summer, we realize that construction can be so painful. We understand, we sympathize and empathize with the traveling public. We unfortunately are, and we hope that folks will realize that we have windows of opportunity to construct our projects. And that is typically during the summer months, right? We cannot construct when the snow is falling and the ground is wet and frozen. It just is not possible. As an example, the McCabe Creek project that is happening just got started. We needed to wait for the runoff to occur. Now we feel it's a safe time. We identified, getting going in the 1st of August. And this is going to be a 2-season project, I might add. We'll continue to work as long as we can. And then probably about late November, 1st of December, we'll have a construction shutdown. And then we'll come back and finish up the project next spring. And again, that could be as early as April, maybe March, and it just depends on what the snowmelt looks like.
Next question is from Gloria Pesh. Hope I said that right. Does CDOT publish or make available their budget and expenditures? If so, where can that be obtained?
I believe that you can find on our website at CDOT.gov, we have a drop-down menu that would include planning. And if you go there, you will find the information that you're looking for regarding CDOT's budget and where our funds go, what divisions are allocated funding, and that's where folks would go. We have a very comprehensive website, CDOT.gov. You can find information about projects, how much each project has been budgeted. There's just a wealth of information on that website. I would encourage folks to explore that.
This will be my last question for you out of this series. If you were to advise Pagosa at large, especially speaking to the road rage and frustration that can happen during construction seasons, and especially since it's through a thoroughfare downtown. Just speak to the people of Pagosa real quick about that.
Again, we know that construction is painful. It can definitely add a little bit of travel time onto your commute. I like to remind folks that we're pretty fortunate down here in Southwest Colorado, as opposed to on the Front Range and the types of delays that a project can add to someone traveling along the interstate or along the highways on the Front Range and in the Metro Denver area. But here, I want to remind folks that many times we're adding 5 minutes extra time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes typically of extra travel time. So we just really plead the traveling public to be patient. Give yourself a little bit of extra time to get through a construction zone. Please just remember that the folks that are working on the ground, our boots on the ground, whether they're a flagger, whether they're an equipment operator, we are trying to make the safest work zone for them as well. And we want them to be able to go home to their families at night. Please know that your frustration could lead to an unsafe incident. So please just be cautious. Slow down, give yourself some extra time, and we want that work zone to be safe for the driver as well as our workers.
Lisa, you're doing a great job for the state. We appreciate everything that you do, and we're happy to have you on the show and explaining what's going on here in Pagosa Springs. I'm sure everybody's going to appreciate this update. Any last words for the listeners?
I am just so happy to be here and to shed a little bit of light on what we do, what CDOT does. I think it's a fascinating industry. And last thing I would say is just I encourage your listeners to utilize a great site. It's cotrip.org.
Such a great site. Save it.
Yes, save it. And it's an interactive site. You can view what road conditions are like, whether road conditions are dry, wet, snowy, icy. You can click on cameras. We always like to tell folks our customer service reps will get calls and customers will ask them, should I go on this trip? We really can't tell you yes or no, but we encourage you to do as much homework before heading out on a road trip. Know before you go. Know what the weather's going to be like. Utilize your favorite weather app. But the other thing is use CoTrip and take a look at those cameras. You can decide for yourself whether or not you're safe and whether your driving skills you're comfortable with that, driving in those conditions. It's a great site. You can find road construction work on the highways, and it's a fabulous site.
You heard it here first. KWUF Studios 106.1 FM, 1400 AM, 102.5 FM. You've joined me for this fantastic update with Lisa Schwantes for CDOT. Thanks for joining me today, Lisa.